if you've been in the guild since at least 2018, I did this demo was the last time I did this demo before. It's a little different, but the main piece I'm going to do here is the same. Hoping to bring that up too bad. First question is, how many people own a skew chisel? How many people hate your skew chisel? I love asking that question. The skew is definitely probably one of the most feared tools in wood turning, and it most often is people don't understand the presentation of the tool to the wood, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. A skew chisel, it's just that it's a chisel on a skewed angle that comes to a refined point. The grind on that depends on who you want to listen to. And on that in itself is a different animal. I do a traditional flat across grind. Mine is 70 degrees, which is what most of them will tell you to do. And I do a 40 degree included bevel. Okay, which means I grind each side to 20 degrees, gives me 40 degrees in the center. And it's the one thing I don't like, I always get annoyed with Alan Lacer, because he gives you that stupid math formula of 1.5 times the bevel equals whatever it is. And if you do the math, it doesn't matter how thick the bar is. 1.5 is always going to be the same degree angle. And if you, I've had somebody measure a tool he ground, it's 40 degrees. So it's a 20 degree bevel on either side if you want to do the math on it. So it works both ways. And so that's what I use here. I find it works really well on hardwoods. It's good for softwoods. You'll have people that will give you any angles anywhere from 25 degrees on up to 80, and depending on what their application is. And that's find an angle that works well for you. Stick with it, and hopefully you can learn to enjoy this tool. It is the most versatile tool in a spindle turner's toolbox, and that's the reason why I like it. You can do a lot with this tool once you understand how to present it to the wood. And so that's what we're going to go over tonight. We're going to go over all the principal cuts that you do in spindle turning, and both in square pommels and in round. I painted it black up here so y'all guys can see the cuts through the wood, because as the white comes through, you'll be able to see it better. So that all being said, okay. So the first cut we're going to do is a soft corner, which is just that. It's just a slightly angled corner. You got me up top? Are we seeing good? Okay, good. And we can still see. I wish we had a light here. So we're going to do a soft corner, and where you start this cut is what kind of freaks some people out on as to what you want. And where I start is actually about 1/4 inch ahead of the line, and then I just make small cuts coming back through till we get to this, till we get to that point. And at that point, you should be on the line in the center and have your cut here. Now, when you make this cut, what you have to understand is, as any bevel riding tool, one side of this tool needs to be your bevel riding cut. So on this one, you need to present the tool at basically so where the left-hand grind angle is towards the direction of travel. And then you tip it over to about 11 o'clock. So that way, as you're coming up, you're cutting at an angle into the wood. So what we're going to do is you start with the handle low, start about 1/4 inch or so from the line I want to get to, and then we're just going to make very small cuts coming in. And as you come back, you're going to come to it, that line, and you start to bring the tool over, so that way you follow the path of your, I'm not there yet, but you follow the path to it, and you get to the cut you're looking for. One more. Last time I did this demo, I didn't understand the lathe I was working with. But see, now I've got right on the line where I want to be. I've got a nice clean pommel right here, soft corner pommel, and I'm ready to go. I would be ready to go with the rest of my piece if that was what I'm doing. The second cut is the exact same cut, just in the other direction. So it's going to be this way, and it's the exact same, just in a mirror image. So you're going to start on this angle, make your cuts backwards. And instead of being this way, you're going to come back. We're now going to be tilting the tool to about 1 o'clock. And you want to bring the right hand grind angle along to the direction of travel. So that way, as you come through, I'm having a hard time seeing that line. And this really is lifting the tool into the cut. I'm stopping more so I can see my line. There's also, this is not a bulk removal tool unless you're doing a peeling cut. You're never going to, I'm not trying to cut massive amounts at one time, never more than about a 1/16 or so of an inch. Yeah, one more cut. And that is a nice soft pommel right in there. I have my cheat sheet here so I don't remember which cut I need to do or which cut I'm going to do next. Okay. Now these are all. The next cut is just a little chamfer cut, and it's pretty simple pretty simple and straightforward. It's one of the few that we're going to use this is the toe of the skew. We're going to use both the toe and the heel. So you do a couple of little cuts here, and then you bring the toe in. We're going to peel that back. And it gives you a nice little chamfer on the corner. Good little piece to work with. And the next cut we're going to do is just a pure square pommel right here. Now this cut you have to prepare to cut this. So the first thing I need to do is I need to make myself a V cut, which means I'm going to come in and just give me a little bit of room in here. So you come in first at 12 o'clock, then rock over to 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, to give me room to get to be able to cut that corner, that pommel square. So we're going to come in here, 12, 1, 1, back to 12, back over to 1 more time at 12. All right, there we are. And see, now I've given myself access to where I can come in here and just cut straight down this line and give me a nice square pommel. I wish I could give me a little bit more room there. Okay. Now in doing this cut, again, it's the left-hand grind angle here, and you want to be kind of at 1201. You don't want this edge flat straight down. You want this edge just slightly cocked over, so it really is just the bottom point that is cutting that tool or cutting your wood. So that way you get a nice clean cut straight down. You have a nice square pommel here. It's cut really cleanly, and if I did it right, yep, no light. Because if it's overcut, it looks bad. If it's undercut, it looks bad. I did a spindle job recently. I couldn't figure out why this guy had this kind of weird undercut on this right-hand side. I think he was right-handed and was trying to make that right-handed, and he couldn't get the tool over far enough and was somehow scooping out instead of cutting. Reproducing that was a pain. So, all right. If I'm not mistaken, 5 and 6. All right. I'm not going to talk about this tool too much right now, but I'm going to grab my parting tool because I need to make room for the next two cuts that I'm going to do. All right. Next cut I'm going to do is just a rounded is a simple rounded cut, and this is one where you're basically kind of planing the wood in an arc, and you're going to start at the middle of the tool and you're going to end on the heel. And this is one even I have some fun with. Nice. That actually came out pretty good. I mean, okay. But the nice thing about it is as you're cutting, you're burnishing the wood. So that's like polished glass right now. 400 grit sandpaper would scratch that. I mean, that always impresses me. Sometimes when you get them done right. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to do is an OG cut, which is a scoop followed by a round, or is a cove followed by a bead, if you want to, in one great thing. We're going to do that right here. Now, this practice piece that I'm showing off is one I got from Alan Batty's the skew chisel video, and in that he uses an old continental gouge, and he comes back at the end of it and cleans it up with the skew chisel. With modern gouges, because I think that video was shot somewhere either in the 80s or the 90s, with modern spindle gouges on a fingernail grind, you don't need to do that. You can do this entire cut with just the skew chisel. I mean, with just your spindle gouge. And for this cut, you really, all your movement needs to be with the right hand. You're not trying to. The left hand is really just pressure on the tool rest as you guide it. So you're going to come in here and just do a scooping action, come back and scoop, and then right into that round. Commonly called a lamb's tongue pommel. That one looks like garbage. That's much better. But that's I know professional spindle turners will charge you $5 extra a pommel for doing that, a spindle for doing that, because they hate doing them. So doing one is one thing. Trying to get 30 of them to look right at every point in that combination, that's a bit of a challenge. That's a bit tricky. But there are these 6 principal cuts into square pommels in your on a spindle, and you can also do some kind of combination cuts. This is one I actually made for the last demo. I did this and I forgot to show it off, but we did the chamfer cut followed by an OG, so you get these kind of nice Alamo looking top to it, and it was real common in spindles and stuff. And a couple things I forgot to pass around when I started this. When I did this demo last time, 3 or 4 days before, Jim Desborough came on my house. He was having some questions about sharpening, and we sharpened his tools up, and I cut just that cove. And then I was like, what am I going to do with the rest of this piece of wood that I've played with? So I made a fake table leg, just to say. Now there's no sanding on this. This is all straight off the tool, straight cuts, with either a spindle gouge or a skew chisel. As for both of these are stretchers for wig stands, and the only thing I'd say on these is trying to do symmetrical work top and bottom. That's where it gets tricky. Always if you want to learn the skew or learn spindle turning, do asymmetrical work, and we'll talk about that. I'll demonstrate that later on. But okay, now that we're done with this part, we can get down to the bottom. Okay. Now, the first thing I'm going to do on this, I'm basically treating this like I would a table leg. I want to clean up the bottom, make sure it's nice and square. And that's very similar to this cut here. I want to set my skew up. Oh, wait. Let's round this first. I don't need to do that until it's round. Cutting on square is harder. All right, so when you're using a spindle, this is a spindle roughing gouge. Say it with me, spindle roughing gouge. Why do we say that? It is only for spindles. If you use this thing on a bowl, I promise you will probably be going to the dentist or the hospital. It's just not designed for it. It's a flat piece of metal. It's bent over, part cut off, and a small tang on it. If you get a catch, I've seen these break here. I've seen some bad accidents from people misusing this tool. It's designed for spindles. Keep it on spindles. It will take squares to round exceptionally well. All right. So in using this tool, you always start at the tailstock end of the lathe. And what you want to do is you want to work when you're working away from yourself. You want to work from the center of the tool on over to about a third up the flute. And when we come back the other direction, it's the center to about a third up that way. And what you want to, in getting this tool done right, you're going to come in, you're going to first ride the bevel and lift at the handle until you start seeing a cut, and then move away. Ride the bevel, lift, move away. As you get positioned into that, you can just keep coming back and keep going back and forth. Now this tool is ground square cross for a very specific reason. And when you want to come back the other direction, clean that up. That square gives you the ability to work right back into that pommel all the way up right into that pommel. We're square. This is a spindle turner's trick I learned, is hold your thumb on the tool, just lightly rest. This is not a death grip. My fingers are resting, and I can feel it when this goes smooth. In general, my tool rest is at is dead center. I keep mine pretty much dead center. If it's under this is 2 inches or under 3 inches or less, I'm usually at dead center. If I'm over 3 inches, I need to be cutting a little bit higher on the piece. So if I was doing a newel post that was 4 to 6 inches in diameter, I would definitely have the tool rest probably up half an inch or so, depending on where it's at. So depending on where I feel like I'm cutting, because you want to be cutting, most of the time you want to be cutting kind of about right here on, if I was going to hold my tool, I want to be right about in that area. So I want my tool rest set to where that's going to be set to that point. I'm not quite fully, or at least mostly round. Mm-hmm. No, I did that with the spindle gouge. No. I said it was off the tool. I didn't say it was all done with the skew. I can cut a cove. I can cut a flat cove, and I will do coves or cove-ish or hollow shapes, and I'll show that in a minute. But they're wide hollows. They're not short hollows. If you look at the tulip shape where it's got the spot here, the sharp cut definitely cove, definitely spindle gouge. But everything up to that point, even though it's kind of a very wide OG, was all done with a skew chisel. So, all right. So that's at least rough, and that's now the spindle's good and roughed out. Now I'll clean up this end because it's where I'm at, and this is again same as this cut. You want to be left-hand grind angle over, and then you want to be at about 1201. So I can just come in here, go straight down that edge, clean up the end grain, and that way I've got a nice finished surface that's ready for whatever I'm looking to do. And then we're going to clean up the surface here, and being that I already have the pencil lines here, it gives me that ability. What you want to do is you want to have this working right about this point. You want to have the angle at about 45 degrees to the wood. You need a little bit of an angle behind there. One of these days I'll remember to bring imaginary little piece of wood to stick back there, because you want it. This is the only point that contacts the wood. There's guys that use a round bar skew, and there's one of the best things about a round bar skew compared to a flat bar skew is it's got full support no matter where you want. So they can plane with the full blade. With this, you can only plane with the lower half of the tool, because at that point it's supported. If you start to get up to where you're in the top half, it's going to catch that point, and it's going to just dig into the wood. And you get one of those fun catches that scares the crap out of you, and all those fun things. So when you're looking to start planing, what you want to do, clean the tool off here, is you want to bring the tool in, raise the bevel till you start getting a cut, and then the direction is just go that way. Go in the direction of the cut. we are. I was out of position. And then bring the tip into the pommel. Now I can't start the cut on the end because I don't have support for the bevel. So now you got to turn it around. I don't like cutting this way. It's just not something I'm comfortable doing, cutting right-handed away from me. So I put this tool in my left hand and I make the exact same cut going the other direction. And there is, now this is ready to sand. I could start sanding at 180 degree easily, and that's one reason why you always plane your work, because if this is the top of a bead, I'm not worried about trying to get rough cuts from a spindle roughing gouge out. I've got good cuts. I got a little paint there still. Yes, I know this is a demo piece, and it's not going to be anything more than firewood, but I still want to make it look like I care about what I'm working on. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about the parting tool, if you want to leave that there. All right, we're going to talk about a parting tool, and in general, everybody talks about a bevel riding cut. Now, if you do a bevel riding cut with a parting tool straight off the bat, you're going to have a disaster. Plain and simple. Torn grain all along the edge. No matter what you do, it's going to look like crud. And how you do this is kind of you present the tool in the wrong way. You bring it up in a trailing action, and then bring it in to ride the bevel and go down where you want. I will, don't worry. We'll talk about this some more. Now, basically now this becomes just a very large parting tool. Turn that back around the other direction so I can plane the rest of it. This is just a peeling cut. I'm not scraping, that's a peeling cut. So now I can't plane with that tool in there. Grab a smaller skew and we'll just come in here, clean this up, flip around other direction, same thing, clean that up. Now I got the surface here is clean, but both of these surfaces, because of that part, are really ugly. So we come in and we do the same thing. We're going to come in and just cut that straight down. Same thing over here on this side. Took a fairly aggressive cut on that one, but it still came through. And then, now that I can see what I'm doing, so now this is not a diamond parting tool. Some people like those. I don't like them because I always have a hard time sharpening them because you got a smaller point here. If you're trying to sharpen it on a grinder. But what you first want to do again is come in there, and also when you're working any parting tool, it's always good to give yourself a little bit of clearance. So come in about half the width of the blade, come back, and make sure your tool rest is tightened so that way it doesn't knock the corners of your piece off. So that gives you a little bit of that. I'll do it one more time. Come in first, go about halfway, and then now it's just ride the bevel down on both ends. Get to have some fun. You're slightly under center. You're coming up. You're pulling it into a trailing action. You could, I mean, sure you could come in and with a skew and cut two lines, and that would eliminate the tear out. But that's two tools to do what one tool can. And as any production tool turner will let you know, it's whatever tool you master, that's usually the one that becomes your best friend. And so I'm going to do a little bit of that soft corner round here, just to give myself some room to do some fun stuff. But this is still, start the tool low. We're about 11 o'clock. As you raise it, as I raise the tool, I'm rolling over. And I'm not applying a lot of pressure to this. You might think, people think that you know, this is a death grip or whatever. This is a matter of, it really is letting the wood come to the tool. It doesn't matter how it really is. It's letting the wood, presenting it correctly and putting it right on the edge where you want it. And if you do it right, so cut yourself off a little ring, and you can see both sides of the, when you pass this around, this is smooth as glass. There's not any imperfection on that. And if I had been pushing too hard, I would have just trashed that little ring. So grab this tool because it's the smallest one I got for this term. So now we can clean that up, clean this up. And even with this, I am planing. I am presenting the tool just the one corner to plane with it. You can plane with this. Richard Finley is a production turner out of England, and if you ever get the wood turning magazine, you'll see him use a beading and parting tool, which is this guy right here, and he uses it almost primarily as a skew chisel that anybody else would use. And I'm impressed that he can do half the stuff, because trying to plane long surfaces with this little tool is a pain in the butt compared to what you can do with a 1 inch or a 3/4 or a 1 inch skew. We'll be talking about. He'll be being used in just a second. This is a 3/8 beading and parting tool. And we'll talk about that guy in just a moment. But I am not a really good person at guessing sizes, so I like having my space done at a little bit better. So I'm going to mark some lines here for my own sanity. If I remember what I'm doing, I can do this. All right. No, that was right. You're right. You're right. You're wrong. You're there. Cove. And then half, there we are. All right. Now I remember what I'm doing. Okay. So now we're going to talk about all the primary shaping cuts for spindles. And the first thing is a V cut. And a V cut is simply just that. It's just a straight V. All cuts, there's 3 cuts in spindle turning. That's either a hollow, a round, or a straight line. This is primarily just a straight line. So what we're going to do here is, basically I'm going to start on the left-hand side here, and I'm just going to start making very small cuts, similar to what I would do with when I did the soft cuts here. But as I keep going back, it's just a straight cut in, go all the way across here. Now, I know I'm not as perfect as Alan Batty was, but if you did this right, you should be able to come over here, switch your cut one time, and cut that off. I'm not quite that good yet, but I get my shape down the way I want it, and I can get myself a decent V cut. Now you can easily go in, cut here, and then just keep going back and forth until you achieve the shape you want. There's more than one way to skin a cat. That's one. Richard Finley, when he does his soft corners, he basically cuts a square pommel first and then rounds it over. However you want it. There's more than one way to skin the cat. That was the way that he instructs in this video, and I like it for the most part. Most of the time I do a pretty good job on it. So, but that's it. And then About 2,500 RPMs. Between, in general, there's a formula that says your RPMs times your diameter should equal between 6,000 and 9,000 RPMs, or 6,000 and 9,000. I could be turning at 3,000 RPMs. It doesn't matter. You know, that should be the low end. At 2 inches, I feel 2,500 is a pretty good speed, and so that's where I hang at for the most part. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a cove, which is surprisingly my least favorite cut, because I feel it's the one I don't do the best. So, and when you're doing a cove, I always find it best to have one finger somewhere on the tool for your reference point. For me right now, I have it lined up with the edge of the flute, so I know as I turn, my flute is going to be coming in. And this is kind of like getting food out of a bowl with a spoon. You bring it in the spoon, you turn the spoon over, and you lift it out. That's what you should be doing. You never want to work up. You always want to work from one side and then the other. You don't want to go up the side, because this is spindle work, and if you did that, you would have some rowdy tear out. Blended at the bottom here. There we are. That's fair enough. I can live with that. All right. And then the next thing I'm going to do is cut a couple beads. And then this is where we're going to talk about most of the tools. Now, you always want to prepare your beads for rolling, and I do like turning my beads as high up as I possibly can. I just feel I can get a better shaped bead for me. Some people want to always have the bead height measured and then the depth measured, and then you round that way. I just don't ever feel I can get a good bead that way. That's my preference, not one that everybody does. So you want to come in, just cut yourself a little V cut on both sides, and you can do it same method I did over there. You can one here, cut there, cut there. It doesn't, whatever way works for you. I'm going to argue on that one. All work. Now, if I had a finer edge on this is a 45-degree angle. I can cut a bead with that. I don't recommend it, because you're almost always going to catch the other side and rip it out one way or the other. But if you've got clearance on the side, a gouge is a fine tool to use. And so I'll cut it over here. I'll cut one over here, and it's just rounding it over. You can cut a really nice bead. And you got a nice little bead because I've got clearance to that edge. Cutting them tight like this, your options really are either a skew chisel or a beading and parting tool. The principle in using either one of these tools is the same. It's just a matter of which one you prefer. I'll start with the beading and parting tool. And it's all you're ever going to use is the tip in cutting this. And you're going to take the tip. I'm going to cut some half beads here. And you keep that engaged as you roll the tool, move the tool, lift the tool, and swing the tool. It doesn't matter what tool I'm using. If it's a beading and parting tool, a skew chisel, or a spindle gouge, all of them, the movement of making a bead is the exact same. I need to move the tool, roll the tool, swing the tool so that way the bevel stays in contact all the way down, and lift the tool so it finishes the cut. And it's identical whether you're doing it with a spindle gouge, a skew chisel, a beading and parting tool, all the same. And when you're first starting out rolling beads, you might want to draw yourself a line somewhere in the center, so that way you keep a nice high point, and you can make sure that your beads are as even as you want. This is not the tool I normally roll with. I say that I have a production, my production tools are slightly different than these. So it's a different feel. Woo! And lovely. That's what happens when you get a catch. Rowdy catch too. Nice. All right. So when you go to a design modification, you come in, take it down a little bit farther. And you'll find one side works easier for you than the other. I'm not going to argue that. And that is one ugly bead. That's probably the ugliest bead I've turned in years. Wow, twice. It is. I'm going to tell you up front, I probably use, well, I use the spindle I use the skew for about 60% of my spindle cutting. I really do. And I'll demonstrate that here in a minute. That's better. Now, I don't think I can do this, but I'll try it. This is not a method I'm comfortable with doing, but if you know anybody, if you've ever seen Steve Jones, Woodturner 21 on YouTube, he uses this tool in a way that just that defies physics in some manners. And he cuts a bead in a rather most conventional manner, where he actually uses just the blade and instead of the tip, and then he ends on the tip in a way I've not played with enough to master that, but he cuts beads on both sides in one motion completely. It's amazing to watch. Doesn't demo though, sorry. But that's all your principal cuts in in the spindle. Some of the worst bead work I've done in probably the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Yes. Slightly? Yeah, you're slicing it. You're slicing it. There's 4 things at one time that you have to do. And one is you have to move it in the direction you want to turn. You have to roll the tool. You've got to keep this in the angle you want to go. So I've got to lift this tool to go to that and swing it out. And the one reason why most guys you'll see use a skew chisel over a spindle gouge is to complete a bead. I only have to go over that far. On a spindle gouge, I got to go over that far. So the handle placement for ending the cut, one is here. And that one's way over, one's 20 degrees, one's 45. So it's a different, moving both directions, and especially cutting into my body, or cutting that direction. I'll show it on this next piece. Cutting them the other direction, real pain in the butt. Now I'm going to do the stretcher of a wig stand. And on the back there, I brought 20 wig stand blanks today. Please take 1, 2, however many you want. I wouldn't mind if y'all guys wouldn't mind bringing back at least a couple next month, and we can get them to the cancer treatment center. I'm going to do the stretcher, the middle piece, just the spindle. I'm fast. I'm not that fast. And all I'm going to do today. Now, this is where I'm going to talk about doing an asymmetrical piece. It's a lot easier to cut something like this than trying to cut the ones I showed you the first, where you've got the same shapes top and bottom, because I'm not trying to match the top to the bottom. You want to get a nice form, a good look, but I'm not trying to make things symmetrical. So cutting a form like this of some manner, a whole lot easier to do, at least in practice, than trying to do, and it's easier to get it to look the way you want it. Okay, so I don't really need this to, I'm going to do something similar. I may not do that exact one, but I'll do something similar. So, see where that knot comes into play once we're doing it. Now, these are, this blank is 1.5 inches. That's where they all are. That's what I cut them at. Anything under 2 inches, you can rough out with a skew, in my opinion. You can rough it out if you want to rough out with bigger pieces, but it's harder. Roughing out with a skew is, there's two ways to do it. First way is really just come in and do a peeling cut, and you don't want to ever do more than about half the blade. That's a lot to peel out at one time when you're trying to do that. The rest is actually just, you're doing a planing cut, and it's the same way as you would do with that. If I was planing out the wood to get a finish, and then we come back and do it the other direction. Whee! And then I go off the end, because this piece is slightly bigger than what I'm cutting. It's like when I do pin blanks, I do them exclusively with a 1-inch skew. It's just, I found just to be the best tool for my cutting style, at least. Woo. Well, that's going to affect my design. Well, that's what sometimes the wood lets you know what it wants to be done. So that's what it's going to do. Now, when you're doing any kind of spindle work, you always want to have the bulkiest section, if possible, or you want to cut from tailstock to headstock. More so, you got more support here. You also want to cut your thinnest sections last. So, like on that, the last thing I cut on that particular one was the bead, or it was the cove, the cove at the bottom, because that weakness in the wood would cause a bit more vibration than I want to deal with, at least when I'm cutting. So understanding how to cut, especially on small spindles like this, is important. A little bit of roughness. I'm just feeling the wood. I'm gonna take it out. I'm not worried about it. It just, like I said, it's a design. We're at a design modification process. Now, I said I'm going to cut the stretcher. Pencils here. And so on those, each one of those has I put a 1/2-inch tenon. So I'm just going to come up here and find 1/2 inch on this old beat up speed square. Just there. Okay. Parting tool. Actually, I'll grab this guy because he's better for what I'm going to do. And this is set to 7/8 of an inch. It's just, there's no reason to go with a smaller tenon. Now this wood is very thin. The whole piece is 1.5 inches. I have this set to I have it set to 7/8 of an inch right now, because I'm using this for a piece I'm working with at home, and I said that's big enough. 3/4 to 1 inch without a problem for these is fine. You don't need to go too small, because there's no need. There's no reason to cut it down to a 1/2 inch tenon or 3/8 tenon. You keep it big. It's going to have better support and stability later on. turn the piece off, go over here. I'm gonna do this right this time. Because this wood's very soft, on this parting, on sizing cuts, I'm just gonna come in and cut really close to that line. This is poplar. Okay. Now, it's over here. As with anything I'm going to do, I want this cut dead square flat if possible, and maybe if possible undercut it slightly, just because I know I'm going to be butting this up against wood. Okay. Now, in general, this is going to be the top side. I'm just going to draw lines. I don't really care. This is do. So when you design on the fly. All right. Stop. This, I know this toe rest is long enough for me to design this out at one point. If I'm going to do that same design or similar design to that I had there, I had a bead up top, so I'm going to put a thicker bead at the bottom, and then I had a cove section here, and that's just, I know what I'm doing. I know that doesn't seem like much. If you know, when you know your shapes, I watch some guys work, and I'm amazed what they pulled off with 4 lines, and they have like 50 different detail works on it. So I'm gonna cut me a little bit of a relief here, and then I'm actually gonna plane this down a little bit farther. I want this a little shorter. And then I'm going to cut a bead here. Sorry if my head's in the way. Not happy with that. Yeah, that works. Okay. So, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. And be careful as you're pulling the tool back out of the cut. That's what I just made the mistake of. I have ruined many a piece by looking away as I was ending the cut and literally just destroying everything I just did because I engaged the blade somewhere I didn't want it to be. There we are. Okay. What? This will be the top, that'll be the bottom, because it's going to be thicker down here. I want to keep the soft or the thinner bits away from me. Okay, well, this is going to be the bottom of the tulip shape, so I'm going to cut here, and this is going to be the cove. I'm going to leave it thick for now because I don't want to cut into that. But what I'm going to do here is plane this. Okay. Cove. So basically now we have a half cove. Well, 2 things first. I have a half bead, which I need to cut first. I have a half bead here. And this is called either, depending on whatever whichever turner you want to work with, but some call this feature a bird's beak. It does kind of resemble that. but basically it's a half cove. I'm basically doing a very long, irregular cove. And so now that's where I want to work this. So I can get my shape in. I'm going to round off the base of this. And now I've got a point from about right here that I'm going to just blend in and start working down to there. And that vibration is really because we're getting a little thin. You can feel it too. As I'm cutting, it's feeling a little bit rough. But that gives you the good, and now I've got rid of that the whole little divot that I had there is gone. See if we're a little better on a smaller tool. Sometimes smaller tools matter. There we are. Just softening that a little bit. But that gives me the angle I'm looking for. Now I'm going to do, so now I want to do that cove. The first thing I'm going to do is basically, I want to pull this down to where I've got a bit of a fillet on this side. And this fillet's probably going to be a little bit lower, which is fine. Like I said, this is going to be an irregular cove. I wasn't trying to go for pure symmetry in this. In fact, I might want to take that down a little bit farther, just in general. One of the hardest things to do is finish a cove once it's started. It's almost always better to start it, to cut the whole thing, cut the whole pass in one pass again. Okay, so now we're going to do a cove. Now when this is a tiny, this cut is very small for the amount of tool I've got here. This is a 3/8 parting tool, a 3/8 spindle gouge, sorry, not a parting tool. And so trying to get this cove, to get it to roll over all the way, sometimes it isn't always the best. So cut with the side over. You don't want to bring it up to the side, you don't want to bring it up the other side. But that sometimes can be a better, especially going into small details on the side of a piece, give you a little bit better work. Or back cut. But again, I'm not trying to make an absolutely perfect centered cove here. Usually you want to be slightly to the smaller side. This side is definitely smaller than that side, so you want the cove hanging over a wee bit on this side. Yeah, I got it about where I want it. Now I just got to clean it up. Yeah, I can sand that the rest of the way. But that's a stretcher in a nutshell. And this is really fancy, or fancy looking cut. We don't need anything this fancy. I'm serious. All you have to do is a straight tube, guys. I mean, that's all I want. Yeah, just straight tube is fine. You want to taper it, go for that. But that's the what? Yeah, poly is what they need. The spindle, the wig stands must have a water resistant finish to them. So polyurethane is what is best recommended. Now I'm going to show you what I do, at least in my production work. Poly. Just I grabbed whatever I bought a can of polyurethane from Rockler. No, brush on. I think it's Minwax, but it's just a poly quart can of poly from that McCoy's where I live. All right, now I'm going to make what this is as a turner. This is what I do for a living. You just, I don't know which one it was, but I mean, as long as the ending finish is water resistant, you're fine. Now this is just a screw chuck. I like using screw chucks for my work because it gives me this is a dedicated size. I don't have to worry about anything else. I can cut it to size. I'm not wasting any wood in the end product. I cut it to size and I'm good to go. Okay. This is one of my production pieces, and it is it's an embroidery tool block. I make a lot of tools for people in the stitching arts, and this is one that very popular. I've made close to 1,000 of these, I think. I know I've sold over 500 of them, so I've made a bunch. I've made just a few. So now. And again, I'm at 2,300 RPMs, and all the basic principles. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to rough it out. So this is a piece of what I think it's sold as what they call select maple. It's got a wee bit of ambrosia in it, but not a huge amount. Got a little bit of flat on 2 spots. I've got it basically roughed out enough to where I can grab my skew. Now on this piece, it's a little bit larger than the 2-inch, so I'm going to raise it up just a little bit, so I'm more in the area I want to cut. I didn't plane back over here because I'm going to, the last 3/4 of this gets removed anyway, so I'm not worried about how clean the cut is on this end. I do have a little bit of, that's still rough cut from the piece itself. So that I do want to get rid of. All right. And out of my crazy necessity for what I do, I have a given path that I go on. It's up 3/4, then up a half. Oopsie, that's the wrong line. Up another half, up a quarter, up a half, up a half. These are the marks that I go on for what I do. Now what I'm going to do here is I can either do 2 coves or 2 V cuts there. I do a half bead, 2 beads, and then I make a little finial as part of this set. Looking at my cove cutting from this, I'm going to practice my coves right now because I didn't like the way those came out. This is where you really start to learn your technique and your style when you're trying to match 2 coves right next to each other. That's where some fun stuff can happen. And that is an ugly cove. Like I said, I need to work on my coves. I didn't bring sandpaper. I didn't want to bore you all with sanding today. I've bored y'all enough with sanding. All right. Now, in rolling beads, I always come in with my 1-inch skew first. Do a couple of V cuts just to give myself some room. And then I use a 1/2-inch skew. This is a 1.5-horse lathe, and I'm used to a 3-horse lathe, so I'm pushing probably harder than this poor lathe wants to, and I'm on the fastest speed. I'm cutting a little too aggressively. That's my problem. There. Not happy with how that one came out. The nice thing about these, I'm not trying to match a given shape necessarily. And a lot of times for the fun thing is the ones that look a little bit more wild sell faster. Especially on a table. If they're as long as they're cut fairly cleanly. That one's just not quite where I want it. The ones that I've had the most problems cutting always seem to sell the fastest, which I'm never going to complain about that. Now, normally I would use I have a small bowl gouge that I use to cut this down. There's no reason why you just can't grab a skew and you take this down. Now I'm not going to finish this up here tonight because I cut this down to a 1/2 inch usually. But I'm at least going to, and then I drill. I'm not going to do that. I didn't bring that tool with me. But I'm going to show you how I at least clean this up. It's an embroidery tool block. If you ever think that we have the corner market on tools, go find a stitcher. I promise you, my wife has at least 100 scissors, 100 pairs of scissors. And I promise you, each one has a function and a purpose. And if you use the wrong pair of scissors for a function or purpose they are not intended for, they will cut you. Not with those scissors, but they will cut you. Basically what I do, I drill a hole that's 1/8 of an inch. They have a tool that fits in that little hole, and I put a little decorative finial, an egg, a ball, acorn, something. I make something fun and neat on top, but down to a 1/2 inch. And then I drill 6 holes on top of here, and then that are 11/32, which fit their little scissors and some of the tools they use. And then I put a small little hole between the two of them. It's only about a 1/2 inch deep, so that way they can put needles in those. And I've sold well over 500 of these, probably close to eight or 9 now. I've been making them for a while. But what? I've been getting 45 for years. I usually buy I'm doing 50 now because the price of wood's gone up on me too much. I usually buy a pepper mill blank that's 3x3x12. I get 3 of these out of them. I try to keep it under $30, so I have about $10 cost in this. They take me about an hour's worth of work, because once I'm done here, I sand it to 1,000 grit. I put a hut finish on it because it's a good quality finish that I have not had a problem with. It lasts, and it's fairly inexpensive, and it's quick. And then I drill the 6 holes in it, which that in itself is a pain in the butt to get those set up right. I have a jig that on my system. It has because that's one reason why I use a skew chuck. The screw chuck. I have this screw can be replaced. I have one of those that I've built it to fit a jig that I have that spins and has marks at every degree for 360. So as long as I drill it on this, I can set my holes up at whatever spacing I want. And I've got a big one that I make that I do 24 on the outside and 12 on the inside. It's 9 inches wide. Fits one of these in the top, and then has that. But that's what, here, David, there you go. Yeah, that's all I use for finish. For most of my production work, except for pins, almost all of my production work that I do, I use hut. It's a good finish. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's easy to apply. So yeah, I brush it on, and it's a brush on poly. I mean, you can use a wipe on poly. You just have to add a lot of coats to it. I use a spray adhesive, and then I put a felt bottom, so that way it's not clunky, and 2, it covers the hole. And then I've had people break the knobs off the top, so they send it back to me. I can peel the felt off, stick it back on the lathe, because I use a screw chuck, not a worm screw. So I mean, it'll go back on the lathe once I'm done drilling, and I'll do a final buff on it because the drilling process kind of messes the wax up a little bit. But I can do a final buff on it, and I don't have to worry about it. It'll go back on this chuck, perfect. And so that way but that's a neat little piece of ambrosia maple. It'll turn out nice when it's all finished. But that's the piece that is basically built my business. Lack of any term, that's one of the best ones I've it's just the piece it has. And I've made a bunch of them over time. The little embroidery scissors are about yay big, cost anywhere from $10 to $150, depending on whose you're going to buy. They're not cheap, but they use, and like I said, even the most avid stitchers will have 5 or 6 of them, and they'll have them, and then they have other tools they use. It's incredible to watch what some of these people do, or the tools they have. Like I said, my wife has never complained about if I said I needed a tool to go buy it. She never has. Because if I ever wanted to add up the amount of money she spent on scissors, she doesn't want that argument. I promise you, she doesn't want that argument. But yeah. I use Spectraply a lot, which is a dyed laminated birch, and that comes in about 50 different color combinations. And it depends on the person's preference. Some people like the natural wood. Some people want the really colorful Spectraply. So, and there's times I thought when I first started making them, the Spectraply really sold well, my first outing. And so I thought, I'll have to buy a lot more of this. And it turns just like wood. It just shreds like confetti. Compared to, I mean, because it being that it's laminated, it just absolutely shreds like confetti when it hits the ground. It's just like you're walking on, like you've been through like a big parade, or had someone break 1,000 cascarones on your head. Yeah, well, no, just the way it shreds. As you cut it, it just it doesn't come off in shavings, like this stuff does. It basically comes off in just really fine powder, for whatever reason. Because the way it's only like 1/16 of an inch laminated birch, but each layer is individually dyed, and they glue it together and press it together. People have asked me if I do that. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's way too much work for. It's always amazing how much shavings you get out of the simplest things. I mean, pin turning in general is amazing. How much you put on the ground from. It was only that big, and I got a pile that how can I have that much wood from pin? So yeah, I will never understand that one. But if you want to watch the master who really did this, Alan Batty's The Skew Chisel, you can get it off of Craft Supply's website. Their YouTube video. It's an old video. I think it's like 7 years on YouTube or something like that. I have watched that. Stuart Batty's father, and it's hilarious because Alan Batty was a production spindle turner. Stuart Batty's a production bowl turner. Alan Batty lived on a skew. Stuart swears that this tool has two purposes, and that one is to open the can of paint, and the other one is to stir the can of paint. So that's Stuart's philosophy on the skew chisel. I will say a skew is probably the most. It is definitely one of the more versatile tools in your arsenal once you've learned to use it. I do a extendable magnet. I did it on the last time I did this video, and it's basically it has two coves and a one bead, and I do it all with a 1-inch skew, and I can cut them in about 6 minutes. But because it really is, once you get used to it, it's a matter of as you turn, rotate, and lift, you can get a nice broad cove with it. If you watch Steve Jones, I've seen him do deep coves with this crazy thing. So depending on your level of mastery, I don't have 35 years experience and a grandfather that used to throw my stuff in a garbage can when I did if it wasn't to his standards. And he'll tell you, he used to work with his granddad, and he'd hand the piece to his granddad, and if he didn't like it, he threw it into one of those big old metal trash cans. And you just didn't want to hear that thong too many times. So, Steve Jones, Woodturner 21 on YouTube if you want to watch this stuff. And I promise you, after about 2 minutes, you'll be like, Jesus Christ, where'd this guy come from? Yeah, he does. I know I've met several professional woodturners who know him, and he does stuff that just defies physics with this tool. He uses the Ashley Isles. I'm honored to have held that tool tonight because that's the one he uses. But yeah, good man. Yeah, that's the tool he uses, an Ashley Isles 1-inch skew.